For the next lecture, we have a distinguished speaker, Yang Berbahagia Professor Ulung Datuk Dr. Lui Lai Ming, who will deliver a lecture on the topic Biomedical Research and Innovation in a Doughnut World. Let me introduce Professor Ulung Datuk Dr. Lui. Professor Ulung Dr. Lui Lai Ming is Malaysia's inaugural National Distinguished Professor, position at University of Malaya, and a senior consultant histopathologist at UM's Teaching Hospital. She is a foundation fellow and academician of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia and the founding president of the Malaysian College of Pathologists. Prof. Lui was instrumental in establishing pathology lab accreditation in Malaysia and the Pathology Act. She currently serves in the Lancet Commission for Diagnostics and the Medical Research Council in UK, Applied Global Health Research Board. Accolades to her contributions to medical science include the National Science Award, ASEAN Outstanding Scientist Award, the Merdeka Award 2016 Health Science and Technology category, and Honorary Professor of the Chinese Academy of Medical Sciences, Peking Union Medical College. Welcome, Yang Berbahagia Professor Ulung Datuk Dr. Lui. I now invite you to deliver your lecture.
I would like to thank the organizing committee for inviting me to be part of this exciting conference and to share my thoughts on what I have coined as our Doughnut world. We are now 20 years into the 21st century. And when we consider the many advances of the last century, there's much that we can thank science, research, and innovation for. The infusion of science into education and healthcare practices and problem-based innovations have led to a doubling of the human lifespan. So should we sit back and congratulate ourselves on these remarkable achievements? But unfortunately, in spite of how far we have come, today's world is far from well. Let us look at these maps. The top one, drawn according to the burden of disease, and you can see that Africa and Asia, especially Papua New Guinea here, are abnormally fat. If you look at the bottom map, drawn according to the workforce to tackle the burden of disease, you see that North America, Europe, and Australia are very well endowed, while Africa and Asia are abnormally lean. So it would appear that we live in an unequal world. So in the 21st century, there are still many who do not benefit from the 20th century advances. And there are many countries and communities left behind. There still exists the 1090 gap in health research, a term coined by the Global Forum for Health Research to describe the observation that only 10% of global spending on health research is devoted to diseases or conditions that account for 90% of the global disease burden. At the turn of the new millennium has seen many countries make an increased effort to address this 1090 gap. But the ability of countries to mount research and innovation to address their own needs requires commitment at many fronts, including, as can be simply illustrated in this figure, building a larger pool of researchers while increasing investment in R&D. Malaysia is depicted here by this small red circle. Although Malaysia has made great progress since the turn of the millennium, there's still quite a bit of catching up to do, as you can see, when compared to, let's say, our neighbor, Singapore, and to Japan and South Korea. The current COVID pandemic has also dealt a serious blow to the R&D effort of many countries, including Malaysia, and we do not know how soon we can pick back the R&D momentum in the post-COVID pandemic world. But pick up we certainly must if we are ever going to tackle our unequal world and its challenges. But capacity building alone is not enough. We need to recognize that there are many paradigm shifts to consider as we tackle the challenges of this century. For one, I would suggest that we look at our world as a donut world. And in this, I'm borrowing the concept of donut economics propounded by Kate Raworth in 2017. In brief, the outer circle of the donut is the health of our planet. Breaches from issues like climate change, One Health, planetary health, ocean and forest management, for example, have serious deleterious impact on health and disease in society. The inner circle represents the individual's health, and tackling breaches of the inner circle require focused healthcare and research. Preserving the outer circle of planetary health is more important than many of us realize. Threats to the planet have direct and indirect links to our personal health. Climate change is just one example. We may think that tackling climate change is not really a biomedical research area. It is for the environmental scientists. But global warming is not just a matter of us having to use the air conditioning more often. We know that climate change affects the quality of the air we breathe, the water we drink, the security of our food and shelter. Actually, studies from, say, a high-income country like the UK have shown that strategies to mitigate climate change can reduce heart disease and stroke by 10 to 20%, and breast cancer by 12 to 13%. And similar studies in a low middle-income country like India have shown that such medications can reduce the burden of heart disease and stroke by 11 to 25% and reduction in diabetes of 6 to 17%. So there's a direct impact on health. We are also well aware that climate change can lead to environmental disasters such as floods and disease outbreaks, leading to sudden massive loss of lives and huge demands on the healthcare system. And also, climate change has a direct link to One Health. One Health is about the interconnectivity between the environment, animal, and human health. Time and again, we have seen how emerging infections of epidemic and potentially pandemic proportions rage among us due to a failure of taking care of One Health. One good early example is the Manchurian plague in the early last century, for which the Chinese government actually sought the help of a Malaysian scientist from our Institute for Medical Research, Dr. Wu Lente. Dr. Wu brought the plague under control after researching and discovering the zoonotic pathogen and its airborne mode of transmission. The Nipah virus outbreak in Malaysia 24 years ago is another good example of how climate change directly impacts on One Health and the emergence of a novel disease among us. So I will delve into this a little deeper later. It is also likely that COVID-19 is another emergent novel virus as a result of a One Health breach. The Nipah virus outbreak occurred as a coincidence of the El Nino climatic event and the massive forest fires in Indonesia, leading to a severe haze in Southeast Asia from August to November of 1997. This resulted in severe flowering and fruit failure in our plantations and jungles. So while we suffer, remember that the wildlife in the jungles also suffered. Deprived of jungle fruits, the fruit bats, which are the natural hosts of the Nipah virus, started to migrate from the orchards of to the orchards of Perak, which at that time practiced a mixed agro farming, which means orchards together with farmed animals. So while feasting on fruits overlying the pigsties, droppings and secretions from the bats contaminated the pigs underneath, spreading the virus from the bats to pigs and from there to pig farmers, hence the outbreak. Control of the outbreak required good science. Discovery of the cause of the infection, the novel Nipah virus, was crucial in this, and discovery of its route of transmission as well. I won't delve into great detail about this whole story, which I'm sure you can read about, and many of us have direct experience about. It is noteworthy that the outbreak, which raged for a good 6 months or more before the discovery of the Nipah virus, was abated within 2 months from discovery of the virus. And the members of the team, many medical scientists who contributed to this discovery, were deservedly conferred the Merdeka Award. Let us go back to our donut world. We live within the donut, between the two circles, and the conditions of the donut within which people are born, grow, live, and age have been succinctly conceptualized as the social determinants of health by the WHO. And it is depicted here by this donut, showing how our physical, social, lifestyle, and economic environments impact on our health. Recognizing our shared world and the need for global action within this donut, nations have come together under the umbrella of the United Nations to develop the Millennium Development Goals at the turn of the century. This has since been replaced with the Sustainable Development Goals since 2016, with 17 goals and 169 targets by 2030. So we have 9 more years to go. I will not delve into them, as I'm sure many of you are familiar with these Sustainable Development Goals and are engaged in specific goals for Malaysia. But just to point out that among the goals is this one: protect the planet. The world today is very different from the world I grew up in. In 1950, the year I was born, about more than 70% of the population was rural. So I'm a kampong girl. But by 2007, we reached a landmark. Half the world's population was urban. And it is projected that by 2030, 60% will be urban. You may ask, is not urbanization a sign of progress and therefore a good thing? Well, perhaps, but there is a price to pay, and we should realize that. It is now recognized that there are many health issues arising from the mega city environment, among them mental health, adolescent problems, crime, and note that particularly the elderly cannot cope or navigate the complexities of huge urban cities and become increasingly isolated. Urbanization is the driver up this pyramid towards the non-communicable diseases, or NCD for short. And as it spirals upwards, it is propelled by environmental risk factors like tobacco use and healthy diets and so on, and psychological risk factors, high blood pressure, overweight, and so on. Physiological risk factors, sorry, not psychological. Note that Malaysia, being a country in transition between a low middle income country and a high middle income country, toggles between these two histograms and have among the highest proportion of premature death from NCD before the age of 60. In simple terms, more and more are dying of NCD, such as cancer, heart disease, and diabetes, before they each reach the age of Vargamas. This is a terrible waste. So the problem of the NCDs in Malaysia is not going away soon. Year after year, we have been winning this unflattering trophy of the fat nation. Our national health and morbidity surveys show disturbing trends, an increasing rate of diabetes and obesity or overweight, and a persistently high rate of hypertension that we cannot seem to bring down. Another NCD is the cancer problem. The global cancer burden is about 18 million new cases annually, and is projected to rise to about 25 million new cases per year by 2030. The most common cancers are those of lung, breast, and colorectal, and Malaysia shows a similar trend and profile, except perhaps for a high incidence of uniquely Asian cancers such as the nasopharynx and oral cancers. Meanwhile, other negative disruptions occur within our donut world and impact upon the health of our communities. We have to be aware of that. The last 70 years have seen more terrorism, social and armed conflict, and refugee crisis than ever before. The turn of the century also drove home another somber message within our medical practice as well. The G8 Science Minister's statement of 2013 declared that antimicrobial resistance poses a catastrophic threat to our communities and called for urgent action. Without proper antibiotic stewardship in healthcare and industry, we may actually run out of antibiotics to use and face the bleak prospect of a throwback into a pre-antibiotic era. Imagine what a disaster that would be. But what about the inner donut? The inner circle represents the individual's health, and falling into the whole of the inner circle means succumbing to disease and mortality. The approach towards the individual's health has changed tremendously along two paths. A recent Lancet Commission report showed that about 24% of growth in full income from low and middle income countries actually resulted from health improvements. So governments today are more committed to keeping the population healthy. It just makes more economic sense. And as researchers, we should capitalize on this space. But for those who do fall ill, the treatment approach has evolved towards targeted therapy, ushering in the era of personalized medicine and precision medicine. The concept and challenge of precision medicine is to deliver the appropriate dose of the right drug to the right patient at the right time. By tailoring therapy to an individual's disease and his personal profile or makeup, money should not be wasted on a drug that is not going to work for the patient because he does not possess the actionable target for that drug. This should also avoid unnecessary drug reactions and resistance to drugs. And precision medicine basically maximizes effectiveness of treatment and improves monitoring of relapses and recurrence of disease. However, precision medicine requires integration of various information of the patient depicted by this personal donut, comprising family history and pedigree, behavioral and lifestyle data, a wide range of genomic, metabolomics, transcriptomics, and proteomics data, or the omics, as well as disease profile. Here, there is a tremendous scope for biomedical research. But in fact, stratifying patients for targeted therapy is already in practice in Malaysia. Molecular profiling is now a norm in the pathological assessment of many cancers and illustrated here by breast cancer. As shown here, based on a combination of biomarker expression such as estrogen receptor, progesterone receptor, and HER2 oncogene amplification or overexpression, and a proliferative index that's Ki67, it is possible to categorize breast cancer and therefore each breast cancer patient into different subtypes of cancer for appropriate therapy. So luminal A and B cancers which express estrogens can be stratified for endocrine therapy, whereas HER2 amplified breast cancer for Herceptin therapy. Similar genetic profiling for other cancers exists, and this here shows non-small cell lung cancer. Profiling of non-small cell lung cancer can be used to identify patients for targeted therapy and mutations associated with primary and acquired drug resistance. So research into driver mutations is actively pursued in a wide range of cancers, say colorectal cancer as well. And the search for actionable targets is a hive of activity in cancer, in pharmacogenomic and drug discovery research. But precision medicine is not just limited to cancer. There are equally important prospects in non-cancer fields as well, such as diabetes, kidney disease, and heart disease. Tackling the inner donut circle where most of us are working, most of researchers are involved in, involves unraveling numerous complicated pathways. This may look extremely complicated and daunting, and sometimes my research students come to me professing to be overwhelmed and put off by this. But to achieve this requires collaboration between many people, and in fact is the product of numerous scientists all over the world over a long period of time. But I am confident that the human mind And human researchers are able to cope with this. They are amazing. They can cope with this. Look at this map. This is a map of a metro in a city in Japan. Does it not look just as complicated as the previous diagram? Yet tens of thousands of ordinary people navigate through this every day. It shows the incredible ability of the human mind and the human spirit to build such a system and to navigate it. The important thing is to know where to start and where to go. And along the way, we learn to use and adapt many tools to help us, harnessing emerging technologies for unmet medical needs. Perhaps you can recognize some of the tools that you're familiar with or are engaged with: tissue engineering, stem cells, CRISPR-Cas, mobile apps, 5G, organoids, DNA, origami, machine learning. It is an exciting world that we live in. But in everything we do as researchers, the guiding principle should always be that research is about people, and research pursuits have to be relevant to people's needs. This is my final slide. What does this mean to researchers and funders and the wider society? Whether you're more interested in climate change or tackling obesity or robotics or cancer research, we cannot escape that we live in a donut world. Scientists can wear many hats. You do not have to only wear one hat, and you should not work in silos. Past experience have shown that collaborations and alliances can work, such as the SDGs, Global Fund, and the Gavi Alliance. We need to collaborate to take care of every part of the donut, to build resilience to crisis and sustain health for future generations. Thank you for listening to me, and I look forward to our discussions. Thank you.
Thank you very much to Professor Dato Dr. Lui for that very insightful and interesting lecture. I think there's a lot of messages that you have imparted to us. And, rightly so, you have commented on how we live in a donut world and how, social lifestyle, economy, environment will impact on the human health. We don't have much time. Maybe I can start off with just one question. How do we prepare, as laboratory professionals, how do we prepare ourselves to move forward in the application of new technologies and playing a bigger role in this donut world? Thank you.
Well, I think, thank you for that excellent question. I think it's very important. And I suppose what you're doing now, having this conference, is one of the ways we prepare to be part of a community rather than to be in isolation. And you expand your world as you go. So most of us every day work in the laboratory, but we do need to meet with others and share ideas. And it's also important to share beyond your profession, which I believe you are already doing. So continuing development, continuing professional development, being aware of what's happening out there, being aware of the role that you can play, being aware of the impact that you can make in what you do on the wider society is very important. So, in others, inculcate an attitude of being part of the wider society rather than to say, well, I strictly follow my SOP and this is what I have to do, and I don't really what happens out there beyond my work is not my problem. I think that attitude should change.
Yes, Prof.
Thank you.
Louis, thank you so much for that insightful answer. The COVID-19 pandemic has actually, brought a lot of awareness on the limitations that we have in the lab. And looking at the scenario, do you think that multi-center collaboration is the way forward?
Well, I think collaboration has to be the way forward. I think the COVID pandemic has brought up many aspects, and we may mouth it sometimes without understanding what that means. But I think they're very implicit and very fundamental meanings, like all of society, all of government, to deal with this pandemic. And I think that is a very good illustration. It is not just your problem or that other person's problem. It is all our problem. In the global setting, I think countries themselves need to understand that too. That if some countries are left behind, the whole world is left behind. And similarly, if we talk about our own neighborhood, if somebody is affected, all of us are affected. So I think that message has come home, and we need to realize that. So in the health service too, I think you can see that what the laboratory does is absolutely important. Without us, we cannot tackle this pandemic. But what the internist does, what the anesthesiologists do, is also very important. So front line, back line, whatever, we're all in it together. And one part of that chain, if it is not performing or is broken, everything breaks down.
Thank you. There's one question from a participant. Prof, do you think the implementation of precision medicine is possible in the near future in Malaysia?
Well, I think it is possible. I think the concept has to be clarified. It is a bigger concept than many people realize, but being big means that many people has to collaborate to bring about it. Firstly, of course, there has to be commitment to change, to focus the way we practice towards using a precision method approach. That is a policy decision, and I think there are moves made by the Ministry of Health. There is a precision medicine project. There are also moves made by scientists under the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, and I mentioned that mainly because at least I'm aware of that. I'm sure there are other moves as well, but there is the need for collaboration in terms of bringing in the technology to look at the patient, to capture patient genomic data, as well as their behavioral data and the environmental data that affects us, as well as the economic impact of precision medicine. So there's a very big picture issue that has to be tackled. But along the way already, we are practicing bits of it here and there, and the lab has been very involved in it, especially in terms of the disease profiling. So I think we will be there. We are getting there. It's a matter of how quickly we can do it.
Thank you so much, Prof. Louis. I'm afraid we've run out of time. Thank you so much for joining us in this conference. We hope to have you back in future conferences. Thank you.
Thank you very much.